When you get your paper, fold it in half so that the words are on the outside. That's how you'll know you're ready. Yep. All right, Matthew, I need your religion put away, bud. Thanks. Awesome. So you should fold your science paper so the words are on the outside. I didn't do anything on it. I was Then put it in your red folder and you'll have to finish tomorrow. Please put your name on the top of this, up above the word scientific method. Name up here. Kaylin, you can put your religion paper away also. Okay, I'm going to get a highlighter also. All right. So we've talked a little bit about what scientists do, right? And we talked about how they observe, they make discoveries, they explore, they dig, they record their observations, they do experiments, they do all sorts of things, right? So, but a lot of times the scientists, when they're doing something to find out an answer to something like an experiment, they follow certain steps. And the steps are called the scientific method. Have you ever heard that before? Yes, you've heard it? Does anybody know any of the names of the steps that are in the scientific method without looking in their paper? What do you think? Kaylin? Hypothesis. Have you heard that word before, hypothesis? What is a hypothesis? You remember, Spencer? A smart guess, an educated guess, right? It's not just a random guess. Like, we put a little thought behind it, because it's going to, right. It's got to make a little bit of sense. It's not completely random, right? So, scientists use special steps called the scientific method. So, we're going to read about the scientific method. We're going to learn those steps, and hopefully we get to do an experiment to help us follow those steps. All right. So the scientific method, it says, some of the most important discoveries have come about as a result of questioning why things are the way that they are. That is how science begins. In order for scientists to investigate and answer questions about the natural world that surrounds them, they have to follow a series of steps called the scientific method. It's kind of like a roadmap that scientists use in order to understand how things work and why they work the way that they do. Can you highlight that last sentence in that paragraph? It says it's kind of like a roadmap that scientists use in order to understand how things work and why they work the way they do. Well, do you see the bold word scientific method in that paragraph? You can highlight the bold word scientific method and then the rest of the next sentence. Scientific method, right there. Okay. Got it? So, how do they say that this starts? How does science begin? It was in there. What they say? Riley, how does science begin? Right, but what makes them wonder? They need to have a question, don't they? Scientists have to see something and want to know more. So I'm in the first paragraph, or the second paragraph, sorry, do you guys see it? Your eyes have to follow along or you won't know where to highlight. So put your eyes on your paper and follow along as I read the words. When using the scientific method, one of the first steps involves observations or making observations. Will you highlight that word, observations? Yep. And then the next part says, or gathering information on a topic of interest. This step comes natural to most people. It involves using the 5 senses to see, hear, taste, touch, or smell what's going on in the world. So what is something that you have made an observation about? I have one. The other night, all the windows were open in the back of my house, and I was kind of closing things up and getting ready for bed. And I walked through my kitchen, and I was like, whew, what does that smell? And I was like sniffing around the kitchen. I'm like, what stinks? And I couldn't figure out what the smell was. And I'm like, I think it's a skunk. So somewhere in my backyard or behind my house, there's an empty field. So I'm wondering if somewhere outside was the skunk because I could smell the skunk in my house. So I had to close all the windows because I observed that smell and I couldn't find the smell in my house, but I noticed it was somewhere. And when I stuck my head out the back door, I realized, oh yes, that is a very strong skunk smell. I better close the windows or my house is going to stink, right? I observed something that was different and I wanted to find out what it was. So I did. What are some other observations you guys make using your senses? Riley, I don't want skunk stories. Oh, so was it smelly? Yeah. What is an observation you've made? It does not have to do with a wild animal or anything like that. Lainey. Oh, geez. All right. I don't want animal stories. I want someone to tell me what's another observation you make. Something I noticed. Oh, look. The leaves are starting to change in the trees. That's an observation. That tells me what's happening. The leaves are turning brown. Why are they changing colors? Emerson? It's turning fall, right? The air is getting cooler. The trees are going to go to rest for the winter. Kanaya? Okay, so what did you decide from that? Good. All right, let's keep reading. I'm on the 3rd paragraph. The next step is to come up with a problem. So highlight that word problem or a good question to be answered. So you can highlight that problem or a good question to be answered. Ask yourself questions about something that interests you and what you would like to learn more about. Does something seem strange to you? Do you want to find out how something works? Questions should be clear and testable, not opinions or questions that test more than one thing. What do you think that means? So far, we have to observe, right? And then we come up with a question. I observe this smell, right, in my backyard. What's my question? What is that smell, right? But then maybe I want to be like, maybe my real question is, how do skunks make that smell? That's a good question, isn't it? I feel like that's something I would like to learn. I don't necessarily have to do an experiment to find that, but I could look it up, right? Because other scientists know what they do and why they do that. I'm on the bottom. The next stage of the scientific method involves forming a hypothesis. or possible solution to the problem. You can highlight that part. Hypothesis or a possible solution.
Can you also highlight to the problem?
Yeah. Hypothesis or a possible solution to the problem. This is when a scientist uses what they already know and have observed to see what they believe the outcome of the experiment might be. When you're ready, I'm going to flip. Just turn it over. The best part about a hypothesis is that it's simply a prediction of what you think is going to happen. If a scientist's results don't match their hypothesis, this does not mean that their experiment failed. So what if Kyla wanted to make slime, which she does all the time, and she says, oh, we don't have any contact solution. I wonder if, I don't know, something else will work. So she starts rooting around in the closet and finds, no, let's say she finds like dish soap. She's like, I'm going to try this dish soap. Can I use this dish soap and some baking powder and I'm going to make some slime? And then she starts thinking and she's like, ooh, her hypothesis is it might make slime, but it might be bubbly. Yes. So she tries it out. So did it make something kind of slime-like? Probably. But it didn't turn out the way she wanted it to. The most important and exciting step, so I'm in the next paragraph, of the scientific method is conducting experiments. So highlight that word experiments and the sentence after it. In this phase, scientists design and carry out tests or trials that will help them determine if their hypothesis is correct. This step also requires scientists to write down clear and concise procedures or steps to follow and to keep a list of materials that they used. Keeping such careful records will allow other scientists to repeat the experiment at a later date. Why would scientists want to repeat an experiment that's already been done? Seems kind of silly. If someone already did it, why would I want to do it again? Piper?
So they could figure out if it was right.
Yeah. So sometimes doing an experiment once isn't enough. And scientists do it again and again and again and again to make sure it works every single time. So maybe down the road, another scientist is like, oh, I wonder if I change this material with this material, if I'd get the same result. So maybe they follow all the same steps, but they use water instead of orange juice for whatever they're doing. So they make one little change, but everything else will be the same. Please stop. Almost done. I am on the second paragraph there. As a scientist, work on their experiments, they are constantly making observations and collecting data. This part of the process is known as the results. Can you highlight the beginning of that paragraph? As scientists work on their experiments, they are constantly making observations and collecting data. This part of the process is known as the results. It is important to keep careful records so that they can be shared with other scientists. Data can also be in the form of notes, tables, pictures, charts, and even graphs. Right, from here, as scientists work. You didn't know what we were doing because you weren't following along and paying attention. Really what was happening. The final step is the conclusion. You can highlight that word conclusion and then the sentence. This involves analyzing and summarizing the results. This is also where scientists reveal whether or not the data found supports the original hypothesis. Hold on, Lainey. If results do not support the hypothesis, scientists do not go back and change their prediction. Instead, they tried to figure out what might have been wrong with their hypothesis. We're going to save this for tomorrow and do some more work with all of these steps because this is a lot of information, isn't it? So take this paper, put it in your science folder